Well, you bring up an issue, a really important issue of time and sequence. And learning circles as a model is a bounded activity, whereas something like community of practice or learning communities can go on indefinitely. Learning circles have a beginning, a middle, and an end. They have a sequence of activities and they stop at a certain point. And that's because they're project-based. There's an outcome that you're working toward collectively. So everyone has a project. There's a completion of the projects. There's a deadline that you're working on. It's supposed to model in some ways real-world workflow in the workplace. I mean, one of the things that SCAN's report really talked about that schools weren't doing is really helping kids understand a kind of project management skills. So there is an endpoint, and it is like a song, you know, or a melody. It finishes. It starts. There is a phase. There are 6 phases of learning circles. The first phase is getting to know one another, building that relationship, building the foundation that's critical for project work. Then there's the planning the project so that everybody looks at the projects that everybody else is thinking about doing and helps shape them a little bit. Like, well, yeah, that's interesting to your students, but if my students were going to do that, maybe we need to extend it a little bit. And an example I can give is a teacher who was teaching history in a Places and Perspectives learning circle wanted to do a project on the American Revolution because that's what she was teaching. Well, the teacher from Canada said, well, that's a really interesting topic. How about you include what happened to the people, the loyalists, after the Revolution and their role in shaping Canada's history? And then the other school said, well, we can talk about, you know, the project itself was to write letters that would be from your country or your place during the American Revolution. And so the Canadian one wanted to shape it so that the aftermath, which affected their country, and I never really thought about that perspective on history since I went through American schools and, you know, done deal, right? We're a country and we go on. You know, what happened to the Loyalists and Canada just never was a part of our story.
Except for the ones that went to Princeton, other than that.
Well, perhaps. The point that we're making is that there's a process, so planning the projects, and then the next step is exchanging the work on projects. So that constitutes the largest part of the learning circle sequence, is the work that people do, and that's the jamming part, right, and getting the melody right and getting it. And then there's the organizing the projects into the final publication, and which is a joint publication of all of the projects that were part of the learning circle. And then finally the closing of the circle, which, like an opening of a circle, is a social thing. It's where you express the kind of gratitude that you have for working with people, and you close that circle, and a new circle might open. You might participate in another circle the next session.
Sure.
But that circle is closed.
Well, we're going to be going through our version of incorporating your learnings. I'm sure that in the next activity you're going to go in depth and be guided through an exploration of the Learning Circle site and Margaret's thought and wisdom that she's been sharing with us for all of these years. And I'm very excited to know that what we're trying to do, I never knew until today that we're in a tradition that has 100 years behind it, and that there are some very important ways that we can work together. Have you got any final words of encouragement for these folks that are just now embarking on their 15 graduate hours of trying to understand the convergence of digital age learning and their own practice?
Well, the most important thing is to, one, give yourself space and time to learn. So don't expect yourself to go from, beginning to explore technology or beginning to explore new skills to being an expert overnight. It's a process, it's a journey, and it's a journey that you should enjoy. When I said before that learning is fun, learning is just an amazingly exciting activity. And you know, you should be pulled into the joy of learning, because that's why you're teachers. But unfortunately, your job is structured in such a way that you don't have the time to learn. And that's really a problem. That's a bigger structural problem that we all need to address. But so one, you know, enjoy the process. Two, it takes a little bit of courage. The more risk you take, the more likely you are to fail. That's not a bad thing. You know, we have a sort of notion of risk-free learning in our country. In Japan, the teachers actually thank the kid who exposes an error in thinking, because they helped everybody understand the issue more deeply. So making errors is not a bad thing. Having a cycle of action research that fails is not a bad thing. It means that you were willing to take risks. So there's courage to change, courage to try new things. I think that's a really important part of learning, not to be afraid to be a little bit of a risk taker. And then the understanding that you can lead from any seat, and that, you know, you are on a path to being a leader, and that's an important part of learning.
Thank you so much for coming by, Margaret. It was really great.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you for your attention and your commitment.